Hey, what's up everyone? Tankenstein here. In this video, I've got your first look, overview, and gameplay, at least for my channel. Other channels do have gameplay out already, of the Turan II. This is a Hungarian BR 2.0 Rank 2 Italian tech tree vehicle. This is a medium tank that is coming as the first vehicle reward for Season 6 of Battle Pass. That's right, this is a pretty low-level tank insofar as the rewards are concerned, and really just in general. In this video, like I said, I'll be going over the tank in general, but I don't really want to just kind of go around in the hangar screen to say, oh, look at this, look at that, look at the other thing. I'll show you all that right now while I'm kind of talking over it, and I'll describe the tank in detail and how I like it, and if I think that it is a viable or a good portion of the Battle Pass, if this is another reason for you to get Battle Pass. So that being said, let's get into some gameplay. So first, let's describe this tank, and it has a 3.3 to 4.3 second reload and a 10 to 15 degree per second turret traverse. Both of these are dependent on crew skill. So of course, if you max out your crew skill, you'll have a 3.3 second reload, and much the same way, if you max out your crew skill for targeting, you will have up to a 15 degree per second turret traverse, which is really pretty decent at this BR, especially considering that most vehicles are more so fast going forward, or at least somewhat quick going forward, but not so much in the turret traverse area. In addition, the Turan II has 50 millimeters of armor at the front with 25 millimeters around the sides and rear, and this is the thing that a lot of people really love. It's got up to 90 millimeters of armor pen with its 42M heat ammunition. This is going to be its primary, at least in my experience, ammunition, because it is absolutely devastating, so long as you don't hit like a bush or something on the way over to the target, because that will just stop it in its track. Because if you do not know, heat shells just explode as soon as they come into contact with anything. So you need to make sure that you hit directly so that you're hitting right on the enemy tank where the crew quarters are. If you even hit a track, if you hit track guards, if you hit anything other than the main cabin of the tank, this will not work. And also, they are pretty susceptible to being ricocheted as well, at which point they don't work as well. So it's got a ton of armor pen, but it is fairly hit or miss, almost quite literally, insofar as if it pens or not. But once it does make contact with that enemy, most of the time it's a one-shot kill, especially against the smaller targets around this BR. Occasionally you will be facing bigger targets like the B1, for example. You will probably not get a one-shot kill, but against things like the T50, I mean, forget about it. This thing is devastating. And the great thing about the Turan is that it's a fairly large vehicle. As other commentators, well, I guess YouTubers have said, this is pretty much like a main battle tank at 2.0. I mean, I am thoroughly impressed, and in many ways I think that this could be a 2.3 or even a 2.7 BR tank eventually, just because of how big it is. I don't even think I've ever been one-shotted in this vehicle. It takes more than one shot to kill it pretty much every single time that you're going to be hit by anyone. So it's just got a tremendous amount of survivability, and a large amount of that comes from the fact that, one, it has obviously good frontal armor at this BR, two, it's got 5 crew members, and 3, it's actually very large on the interior, which means that if you get shot, for example, with one of the lower caliber shells at this BR, typically they don't have much explosive filler, if any at all. You're going to survive more often than not. So it's a winning combination for not only survival, but destroying enemies, especially with that 4.3 second reload. And that's the absolute worst reload. You can get that down to 3.3 seconds. Absolutely insane. I mean, there have been numerous times where I've actually destroyed enemies just because of my reload. I've had one person try to hit me here, I've been flanked by another enemy there, and boom, because of this incredible reload, I can take out both without having a sweat. It's really awesome. Now, in addition to this, it's got a 43 km/h top speed, 260 horsepower at 2200 RPM, and a 19.8 ton weight. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, it's not all that great in terms of horsepower per ton. What is that, around 12.5 horsepower per ton, give or take, if my mediocre math serves me well. It's a little bit more than that, which is not that bad, but it's really not all too far off from, for example, the King Tiger. But the thing is, it actually performs fairly well. It feels like it has much more than 260 horsepower. I could imagine it having somewhere around 325 to 340 horsepower. With how it feels, it genuinely moves very well for how much horsepower it has, so it's quite impressive. And additionally, one thing that I noticed is that it has only a 73% visibility rating, meaning that this is actually smaller, or at least the game views it as being smaller, than the M18 Hellcat, which is ridiculous ridiculous. I'm not saying it's ridiculous in a bad way and criticizing Gaijin, but that's a pretty crazy statistic if it is going to stay in game as being, of course, again, 72%, because that means that this is an absolutely tiny vehicle. If you play arcade, that means people are going to be able to view you a little bit less easily, because if you know how arcade ground is, you can kind of see everyone rather than just the person you're looking at, and also it will make it more difficult for you to be seen just via eyesight in RB. So just a really interesting choice. Plus, one thing that I did not mention is that it has those side skirts. Now, a lot of people might be wondering, especially if you're a lower BR player, you might not have a ton of experience with it, or you just don't know history. Totally fine, I get it. Everyone starts out somewhere. Those side skirts, they do provide, of course, an extra 8mm of armor, but most importantly, what they do, especially against German tanks, they provide against heat shells. So you have additional armor against heat shells. Remember how I mentioned a few minutes ago how heat shells basically explode on contact with anything? Pretty much the same exact thing with this sort of armor. That's the whole premise behind this sort of armor, because not only does it provide an extra 8mm of armor protection, which does help, especially at low BRs, because when you're dealing with tanks that have like 50mm of armor pen, and you have to penetrate the side of a tank that has 25mm of armor on the chassis itself, or the hull itself, plus 8mm, and then you put in angle, that 8mm could add up to a lot of armor. But more importantly, especially against those German tanks that use a lot of heat ammunition at this BR, they will prematurely explode right when they hit those side skirts, and it will mean that you will be pretty much invulnerable against those tanks. I mean, at least so far as they hit those side skirts. So if you notice a German tank coming up on you, definitely turn your side skirts to them. It might not seem like it's a good idea, but it will be in the long run. It will pay off, because even if you're showing off your weaker sides, those heat shells will explode prematurely and you will be safe. Well, safe insofar as you'll probably be safe. I mean, I can't guarantee that you're going to be safe, but more likely than not, yes, you will be safe. It provides much better protection than if you're facing a heat-equipped player head-on. Now, at this point, I just kind of want to go over my experience with this vehicle, and I'll tell you, I think it was the last battle pass or one of the more recent battle passes, they had the Turan II, which was a 1.3 BR tank for the Italian tech tree, in much the same way, released very similarly to the Turan II, and the Turan II stunk. Well, it didn't stink, it was just very generic. It didn't really feel like anything too special, outside of the fact that it was just another take on a 1.3 BR tank. Now, between reserve and I'd say 1.3 and 1.7 BR for the most part, even sometimes up to 2.0, a lot of tanks are very generic. This does not feel like a generic tank. It's got its own character, its own personality, and it's a really, really fun tank to play, because in many ways, again, as I mentioned before, as other commentators said before me, this feels very much like a main battle tank. This feels like you're driving a tank that you'd experience at very least at 4 or 5.0 BR, at 2.0 BR. So in some ways, it's actually really, really good practice. Now, of course, at the higher BRs, at 4.0 even, you're going to be having much higher velocity shells, so you don't really have to calculate some ridiculous shell drop over a distance like you will with the Turan II, because it's got awful shell velocity, especially with that heat shell. But of course, it does feel like just a very solid vehicle. There's not really too much insofar as weaknesses are concerned. Of course, if you're facing regular kinetic projectiles, so let's say AP ammunition against the sides or the rear, you're going to get penned, and it will not be a good time for you. But because, again, this vehicle is so big, it has a tremendous amount of survivability. And when I say big, of course, I mean on the interior. It's got a lot of crew space. In some ways, I kind of want to liken this to the Kachi, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a recent Operation Summer vehicle. And it just, the reason being is because it can deal a lot of damage, it's an unusual vehicle, and it is very big on the interior. Very rarely would you die in one hit with a Kachi, much the same like with an LVT. This is in many ways like that, except I'd say about one step down, and it's, again, this is not a strike against the Turan II, but rather it's just praising the Kachi and how powerful and how survivable that is, in much the same way as I said the LVTs, because this is pretty much the actual tank version of those, whereas those are amphibious, very like boat style vehicles. This is a main battle, a medium tank really, but it's a tank, just a tank. It's not some amphibious vehicle that was designed for a specific goal like the LVTs and, again, the Kachi. This is just a tank, and most tanks are not nearly this survivable because they don't have that big of an interior, but this does. So, I mean, in general, I've had a ton of fun with this vehicle. I cannot say enough good things about it. I wish that Battle Pass had higher BR vehicles. I mean, what I've noticed is that this Battle Pass, the BRs are very, very low, especially if you like to play AB. I mean, the M64, which I also have a gameplay video for, is a battle rating 4.7 in AB, which is absolutely ridiculous, considering that the top vehicle, which is that strike aircraft for the Soviets, is like a battle rating 5.7. So it's at best you get two 5.7s, at worst you get one 4.7 and one 5.7, plus a 2.0, at least currently in the Turan II, which although it's a great vehicle, it's still only a 2.0, and I wish that they released this as a regular tech tree vehicle, maybe as a separate Hungarian tree vehicle, or at worst as a premium. It's just kind of stinks that this is Battle Pass, and by premium I mean purchasable premium, because once Battle Pass is gone, this vehicle is gone. It's kind of like fear of missing out. But anyways, that's pretty much it. You know, tell me what you guys think about this video. Initially, I was not going to make a video about the Turan II, but I felt really, really good about it. I felt like this is a very good vehicle and something worth making gameplay for. So again, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think about my new gameplay style, if I should move forward with it, what sort of vehicles you'd like for me to make gameplay for, what sort of games maybe that you'd like for me to make gameplay for. But either way, thanks again, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.